we can see okay.
See? And
my laptop finished updating.
Can we replace the monitor that burned out?
Yes. Already works.
Use that one.
That burned down on the table?
Burned out.
2025.
I love it.
We are not using
2040 plan.
Dude, I love that picture. See, there's no freaking lines.
That's Photoshop. Okay. Sorry. We are ready.
thanks, everybody. My name is Josh Rowland. I'm with LAI Design Group.
Scott Thorson, Oakwood Homes. Like to introduce Ryan Smith with Oakwood Homes. I think most of you got a chance to meet him today, so I'd like to welcome Ryan as well.
And David, just to clarify, is staff going to do a presentation after ours, or?
We have some if we need to go through it. The project is somewhat familiar with everybody here, so I just went right to the land use plan, and I'm sure you'll elaborate on many of those items.
We weren't planning to take up much of the council's time tonight. I'll do a brief overview of our land use plan and then hand it back over to staff. We had a summary of some of the items that were discussed during the Planning Commission hearing, and I believe all the council members are well aware of that. So what I'd like to do is just jump to our land use plan and just sort of reiterate a couple of the high points. We have 4 major housing types that are proposed here. We have a townhome, attached townhome product. We have a carriage house, which is a cluster single-family detached product. And then we have multiple ranges of single-family detached housing as well. And it's all centered around a framework of a real dynamic open space plan that it's focused along our eastern edge, both the Jordan Promenade Waterfront Park, as we're calling it, as well as our Hot Springs Waterfront Park, which will be part of our Phase 1 development. We also have neighborhood parks, which were strategically oriented on those waterfronts so that they can be part of those waterfront parks and create a larger open space network accessible to the public. We have other pocket park areas on the the western side of Riverside Drive to service some of those neighborhoods that aren't immediately adjacent to the waterfront areas. We have commercial sites both on the far north portion of the site as well as in our northwest corner of Phase 1. We have 4 church sites on the meeting house sites on the project, a school site, and one of our other very fortunate features of the project is our adjacency to the regional park, which is exciting to see getting underway. It's going to really kind of springboard our Phase 1 portion of the project, which we're getting started on as we speak. So that is the general overview of the project. We're here tonight mostly to answer questions and provide clarification for you all if anything comes up.
Perfect. Just kind of one thing I just wanted to reiterate with staff. We had talked with Village Plan 1 and 3, also with the retirement community to the south of this, making sure that on the plat it was recorded that there's lights and noise till midnight associated with the sports field, so that we don't have like a neighboring city did where they put in nice lights and parks and it closes at 7.
That'll be on the plats.
Yeah.
That note.
On all the plats.
Yes.
On 1 and 3, yeah.
Just right around the corner, basically, there's both areas.
So just so people are aware that you're moving in next to something great. Okay. Council, any questions?
I have a
Okay.
couple things. All right. Just as this is the community plan, there were a couple things. I get to go first, so I get to notice the things that Shelley would have mentioned. One was on page 27 to 29 of the community plan document. You refer to phases, which I believe we want villages rather than phases. So it's just, villages refer to location and phases refer to timing. So I just don't want there to be any confusion as to what's going where. And then I spent a lot of time looking at the open space and which ones were private and which ones were public and stuff like that. The neighborhood park there in Village 1, do you have a concept of what size that's going to be?
So.
'Cause that's one you're asking the city to take over the maintenance of, so.
Correct, and part of our conversation over the course of this review with staff has been that, there's certain size parameters for maintenance, and that's why we've put these neighborhood parks next to these waterfront areas where Village 1, I think it's 5 to 7 acres total when you include the waterfront areas, but those don't require a lot of maintenance.
Right.
That neighborhood park that's highly amenitized would be in about the 3-acre range, and some of that would include a private component, a swimming pool type feature that would only be accessible to these residents that we would not be asking the city to maintain.
Well, and it's also, to your benefit, right next door to something that we're going to be maintaining anyway. So, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of those requirements we have. And I had the same thoughts about the neighborhood park along the river in Village 3. You're going to be maintaining that, or we're going to be maintaining that river walk area anyway. So it works out. I just wanted to make sure that had been considered. On page 26, you talk about a school park, and I wasn't entirely sure whether that was a park just adjacent to a school, or that's how you're walking off your spot to put a school.
I'd like to just clarify a few things. So in our open space plan, which is a separate sheet from the land use plan, we identify all of the open space types that we're providing, and those descriptors come out of the district plan, the district area plan for the city center. And that district area plan recognizes spaces that are not as commonly known as open space, like meeting house sites, school sites, as open space. We didn't include those sites in our open space calc. Right. So only our neighborhood parks, waterfront parks, pocket parks, and those other trail corridors are what we included in our 18 to 24%.
Right.
We wanted to list those, though, because it's consistent with that district area plan that says, hey, those are in addition to. And so when we say school park, that for the summer months and the evening hours when school's not in session, those neighbors go to those places and use those sport courts and playgrounds and fields when school's not.
Right, and that's
Football practice every day.
yeah, that's totally fine. I'm not concerned about, it's good that you didn't include it in the open space calculation. I think that's appropriate. I guess my question, and I don't know whether this is for you or for staff, is this a limiting factor? Like they can only put a school park in Village 2? Because in there you only identify it being in Village 2. I have concerns that I know, you've got to work it out with the district and everything, but I have concerns that you might need more than one school site in this neighborhood just to service it. And so I don't want to, again, that's up to the school district to decide whether they're going to purchase the land. I don't want to limit it to where you can't if such a thing comes about. So I don't know whether we can, but I also don't want to say you're going to have it in 1, 2, and 3, and so that now you're required to have it. I don't know which way the document works.
Yeah, this doesn't answer all of your points, but I think it'll answer a couple. Where we've got it shown is where early conversations with the school district placed it, and it's also on a location where if it needed to be built with phase 1, it's close to Riverside, it could come on earlier. We're continuing to have conversations with the school district. And
right, I don't want to box you in where, you're having to come back and do a major plan amendment or even a minor plan amendment, have all these meetings and stuff just because the school moved across the street or something like that. Or like I said, you put in one school and, before you guys finish, like, hey, we wouldn't mind buying some land on the edge of your property because we need another school in the area. So I don't know whether.
We have quite a bit of kind of caveat language in here about how these things can move and it's subject to change without needing to be amended, but I would more so have to defer to staff about the technical nature of how that gets interpreted.
By putting a school park in 1, 2, or 3, does that require, or 1, 2, 3, however, does that require them to put a school park in each one, or does that
No,
option to put it in any one?
yeah, I think that gives them the option.
1, 2, and/or 3.
I don't know how you want to phrase it. I just want to make sure that we have flexibility to move or add. We had a meeting today with, and you guys were there, with and you understand what the school district is dealing with out here, is we don't have enough school space to put all of the kids we're having, so.
And we're formally meeting with, Rob tomorrow. We're starting that process. We've met with them a couple of times, but now that we've kind of got the parameters of where we are and where we're going, we're starting that process with them. But I
appreciate that.
Defer to Stroud.
This fall.
I realize that. I'm just, you never know what's going to happen, and I'd rather have the flexibility in that aspect. And this one, I was really proud of myself. I really thought this was one Shelley would normally find, because I don't normally find these things. On page 18, the one-way road sidewalk, or the one-way road cross-section, I think you need to flip your sidewalk and your park strip measurements. See? Wow. She had that one right.
Well, Gordon wouldn't approve it anyway with his community plan, so.
So, I just figured that you probably want both park strips the same size and both sidewalks the same size, so. Those were the main concerns. My main concern was just the parks that we were going to take over as public parks. I wanted to make sure that they were appropriately sized and appropriately located, so that was efficient for the city to maintain.
Yeah, we talked about that today, over lunch. I brought that up and said, typically the city doesn't take anything over 5 or under 5 acres. But since you see these are located next to areas that the city's going to maintain anyway, it would probably make sense that get it all done at one shot, and the city can take care of those.
As long as it's cost
Can I
effective for
jump
the
in on
city.
that one if that's okay? So I'm a little uncomfortable with that, because if a park location changes, however, according to the document, we still have to maintain it because it's a neighborhood park, where we wouldn't if it weren't contiguous.
And we could put something in there that says it has to be contiguous to
So
the
that's what I would
riverfront park or the
suggest.
greenway.
It has to be contiguous to space that the city would already be maintaining
right.
normally. So if,
And that's the intent, so that's fine.
right, I just want to make sure, we always have to look at future, perchance something happened and Oakwood didn't finish this, what would happen if other developers came in and, tried to look for loopholes kind of thing, right? That's the kind of things we have to look for.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilman Porter. Other councilmen.
Let's see. So I just a few brief comments about, I'm liking the signage and the furnishings that you've provided there. Me personally, I like the touch that's bringing. And also the additional guest street parking that you've done in some of those cross sections there. Let's see, and then just a few other items. So I'm sure this is going to get brought up, but as far as the cottage arrangement with the easements, me personally, so the alternative is in my neighborhood we have a sub-neighborhood called the Preserves, and they have 5-foot side yard setbacks. And whenever you drive through that neighborhood, they can't really do anything with that yard. Usually stores a lawnmower or clippings or what have you. And so I thought this was, I think, a good way of thinking outside of the box of how to just make the land more useful without changing the building envelope of the house. And so, so I appreciate that. Just looking for ways to make it a more useful neighborhood, and having that ability there. As far as the question raised about it not being HOA maintained, for me, that wasn't a huge issue, but what was brought to my attention is that liability concerns Whereas if it was HOA maintained, they have insurance, and so if someone gets hurt on that easement that is technically still owned by that property owner, that could be an issue. Is that a tipping point for me? Not so much, because someone can walk on my sidewalk or my driveway and get hurt and try to sue me as well. So I don't know if that really brings up a huge concern for me on that. The maintenance of the yard, it's fenced, and so I'm not too concerned about the maintenance part of HOA maintaining it. So it'd just be the liability thing on that side. But if I may, Kevin, is that any different than just being a personal property owner? Someone having an easement over into my property if they got injured or something happened?
Well, in the easement document itself, you could specify who is liable. That's very common to have that in an easement agreement.
Yeah, and so I think if things like that are covered in the document, I don't see any issues with that. Again, we walked the product. I thought it felt good. It's going to be something that appeals to a certain demographic very well. Yeah, I just wanted to, those are my comments.
Thank you.
So I too want to echo, I like a lot of the design elements, especially like the entry monuments with the wood and the metal combination. I think it adds for a great combination of with the natural interface. I'm very excited about the large riverfront opportunity for the city with connectivity. One of the things, just working with staff, I believe we unofficially maybe gave Councilman Barch to represent the council on the trail connectivity plan and things. I don't think we actually ever made that final decision, but I know he does it, but you're the only one who really stepped forward and volunteered. We sort of threw her in front of us and then back 2 steps forward. Yeah. So just, there's some connectivity things on the west side, because when we get up to Pioneer Crossing, there's not going to be anywhere to go. It sort of dead ends, and even if you walk up, there's no way to access the trail without having to get across Pioneer Crossing. So as they're continuing to do a lot of work with Pioneer Crossing, potentially an undercut to connect and to get us to the west side.
Yeah.
I mean the northwest side of the
So
river.
it's a little, out of not quite this application, but the other thing we talked about possibly is, and it's kind of out there, but maybe even doing like a suspended catwalk kind of around, so it's still on the river level from the walk level.
That's cool.
But some kind of
just have that be part of the
connectivity.
plan. I love having, we're going to be talking about the east side, where some of this is Saratoga Springs, some of it does get into Lehigh, but we still want to make sure that we're having good connectivity because our residents are going to be using it. So let's take advantage of this, and I want to make sure, I'm the direct staff, that I want to be an active partner with the developer, because we are going to be maintaining this, working on different things that we can do besides just the canoe launch, even like little stations, things that we can do as you're walking along that can really make it very usable and appealing to draw people in.
Like educational kind of stuff?
Yeah, educational, even like exercise things like we've done on other parts. I think there's a real opportunity to make this a draw. We can have people even coming and parking in the RC parking lot and potentially accessing this. Yeah, at the RC park, right.
Councilman McComber, just so you're aware, we met earlier today and we shared slides and some of the pictures. We went through the pictures and discussed the things that we had learned when we did our riverfront tour as staff, coming up with some of the things that we liked about those developments, and so we've already been in communication.
Great, and so continue to do that and then pull Councilman Barch in. I'm happy to come in if there's conversations. I mean, I just think that this can really become an amazing element of the city, tying in with our Patriot Park facility and our city complex. This really could become the true heart of the city that we sort of envisioned when we brought the sports complex here, and then when we started looking at putting the city hall and the library and the police station and all of that here. So another thing I just wanted to point out is I really appreciate, it's not really showing here, but as you get into the details, you put a lot of your more dense housing internal to your product. I appreciate you didn't put it along the main corridors, which is very visible to the people driving by. I think it's going to make your product look more appealing, you're going to draw more business. I think it's a brilliant business idea, but it also makes the city look better. So I just wanted to point that out, and I appreciated that because we didn't have to like push that point or encourage you to do that. You're looking at it yourself, and I really do appreciate that. Another thing I want to point out is I appreciate the lack of greediness on the commercial. You could have easily have looked at putting a commercial on the north corner of Pony Express as well, and I think it would have really junked up that whole intersection because we already have a gas station going in across Kitty Corner from yours, and it just could have created, I think, it less appealing, and this is going to have it feel more open. The view corridors, as you go through, are phenomenal. You really took the points that we talked about. And not just using roads. Another thing that I appreciate is you didn't just have the roads be the view corridors, because yes, they are a view corridor, but they're not as pretty. You also used backs of your developments and have like a green space, if you would, to connect where they would have their backyards and have that connect down. Because Redwood Road is higher than your development, as you know. And so the views to the river and potentially to the lake, which you captured on your very first picture, are being maintained. And I think that's a good steward of this land, and it's a good partnering with the city and the vision that we have. So I appreciate that. I also want to point out that I've gone to some of your product, which I appreciate doing that invite, and we're going to be going with another developer to go look at his product too, because it really helped me to see the care that you take and your entrance features, you're making it feel welcoming and pulling people into your community. And even I've gone on your website and I've seen other communities in other states that you've done that, and I'm looking forward to, as I've seen some of the drawings and pictures here, what you'll continue to do going forward. I just think this is going to end up being a real win and a real example, and I think that as we continue to work together to be successful in this, we'll be able to be an example to the other 2,000 acres all around you, that potentially other things will be coming, and we can have other conversations similar and say, we'd love to see something similar to this. So I appreciate the efforts, and looking forward to going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So again, I have to, and staff has echoed this also, this is probably one of the most complete, thorough applications we've seen, and it's very well done, so we really appreciate that. It made it easy to go through. It's great also to see mostly all those provided and complies, and so it's nice to be able to go through that easily and say, great, we're taken care of. A couple of items to talk about. So I'll start with what I consider the ugly. So for anybody watching, future, on the record, whatever else, for me, 0 lot lines are an absolute no-go. I can't do it. I just can't do it. And you guys don't call them 0 lot lines, you call them shared easements, and that's fine. But nonetheless, it kind of creates some of the same issues. And so I wanted to kind of go through some of those issues that I see just for the record. So it's the big one is who owns the landscaping. I know that you've talked about the fact that you want to take care of a lot of this inside of the easement, the actual legal document for the easement, and that's fine. But nonetheless, there still creates all of this conflict between, or potential conflict between neighbors. I've had good neighbors and I've had bad neighbors, and when things are clear and simple, it makes it much easier even with bad neighbors. So so who owns the landscaping and the easement? If an owner wants trees and they plant them, but the other person's got the easement who's taking care of them, the plants, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully if you do this, it sounds like the rest of the council's going to be okay with this. Make sure you take care of that, and I understand that you're probably going to do that. We had a good conversation earlier today. As far as the other thing is the liability. So anytime they're maintaining their yards or the side of their house, you've got dogs and kids that you possibly could be coming in contact with. You have a huge liability there. Councilman, oh my gosh, I almost said Bud Podeska. That would be, alluded to this, but with the liability, I realize that technically, legally, you'd say, yeah, you don't have liability because that would be factored into the easement document. Nonetheless, people sue all the time, and you can't legislate stupid. That being said, personally, I don't think that it's a good idea to put people in those situations in the first place. If you can avoid it, why wouldn't you avoid it? So, my personal opinion. As far, also, we talked a little bit, and I talked with you about this today, but sheds, they're still going to have to follow their setback rules. And I don't know if you're going to allow sheds inside of that cottage product or not, but if they do follow setback rules like they're supposed to, whether it's requires a building permit or not, then they're going to have their shed in the middle of their backyard a lot. And we're going to get complaints from those owners of, well, why can't I put it there? That creates a problem for the city. So that's another reason why I can't do this. Also, just a comment, and we've talked about this, Mark, and I don't know how this got resolved. If it did, I don't think it has yet as far as I know. But right now, per our code, a fence must be constructed if there is an easement. It must be constructed if there's going to be a fence on the property line. So as our code stands right now, because there's an easement there, you have to put the fence on the property line, which means it's going to negate your actual shared use easement because you're going to have a fence anyway. So just don't know what you're going to do with that one. But right now, that's how our code stands. I realize that it's not the cleanest code, and it actually creates some problems for everybody else too. We've talked about that with staff, the fact that that needs to be fixed. But right now, it's not useful to you. How's that?
This code is different than our other code, correct?
No, this is not for fencing. This specifically, so this is going back to all the fencing, to the regular
It
fencing.
doesn't go into the planned development.
No, and plan development goes back, even the regular DAP goes back as far as fencing goes to our regular code. So it's kind of an oddity in our code that honestly I think we need to fix anyway.
Yeah,
Well, we
to
should
that,
work through
Stroud will
it.
be bringing you a correction on that because it's got issues in
It's-
all aspects.
In
of
all
what we're doing
aspects,
there.
yeah. So, anyway, so then just the general, kids bouncing the ball on the side of the house. So for me, just in this particular area, for me, this is an absolute no-go. So while I really approve of the rest of the project, literally because of this, I can't approve this because I can't put my name on this. So we've had great discussions, and I like the rest of the product, but I literally can't vote for it because of this. And there aren't a lot of things that are actual no-goes. This is one of those. Okay, so then I have some questions and some other comments. So on the non-motorized launch across the river, you're talking about doing the off-site improvement. Are you including that? Is that extra? Are you doing, is that included in your calculations? Are you still talking about doing that with us?
A question that came up from
Yeah.
a planning commissioner was in regards to, we think you're going to be a little light in Village 2 on open space. And, we haven't, because we're not in the village plan level yet, we don't know what the exact calculations are, so we don't know where we're going to be today when we get to Village 2. We have offered up as a suggestion that if we're in a position where we are short on open space in Village 2, because what happens when we get to Village 3 is we make up a lot of open space, is that we would have an option to either and/or type of scenario, improve part of our own Jordan River waterfront, or partner with the city on a project. Staff has shared with us that you have a designed but not funded launch at the RC Park parking lot. So we're just trying to create some options for creating, improvements to make up for a shortfall. If and when we have
We've
it.
done both scenarios before, so we're good with either one of those. That would be great. We would love to partner with you on that if that's something that you would like to do. As far as the open space also, you also mentioned that you hoped that you were going to maybe be able to get in and make some kind of agreement where you could start putting trees in along that parkway a little sooner.
Yes, what we had talked about doing, it came up in Planning Commission was, we're going into Village 1, and there's this beautiful park along the edge of Village 3, but we won't be in Village 3 for 3 to 5 years. And so what we've discussed with everyone and with the land seller is an agreement that allows us to get in, and we've made the commitment that we'll go ahead in now, or, as we get through approvals, to go ahead and start those improvements and not have them wait for Village 3. The point that we talked about today was one of the things that allows us to do is give trees 3 to 5 years of growth opportunity from even when we're in Village 3, developing and selling homes. And so we've agreed that we want to be a part of that, and we'll do that as part of our Village 1 plan.
That's great if you want to do that. Another nice thing about doing that a little early if you can is then as those immediate neighbors adjacent to that green space come in, they're not going, oh, look, I have perfect view. hey, you planted a tree in my view. So it just kind of helps them to know where those trees are going to be beforehand too, which is kind of nice.
That's a very good point, because
Yeah.
we've been there.
Yeah, and I know, for example, Councilman Podesta's been there with his neighborhood and different things like that, so still, yeah.
Well, and it's a rarity in our city to move into a neighborhood with
With
established trees. So usually, you know, for the first 3 years, you got a bunch of toothpicks out there.
Yeah. Okay, as far as signage goes on the entry monument, I have no problem with the support piece, the art piece going up to 20 feet. I think that's fine. We've allowed that in other areas as well. It looked like, my original comment was the signage, the actual signage part needs to stay under 7.5, which is what we've done. But in your illustration, it looks like the top support piece goes up to 8 foot. So the actual sign will be under the 7.5, so I have no problem with that. Also, on the obelisk part, on the monument part, was it also the 20-foot? It wasn't clear on that one.
That was the 20-foot.
That one part was the 20-foot, so the other part of the big entry monument wasn't full. I saw the 11-foot to the bottom of it, but I didn't know how far it went above, so just, okay. So the 20-foot is fine on that. So just a comment, so on your lot sizes, I would recommend taking out the small, medium, large on the single family, and the only reason I say that is because those are not exact terms, and what I consider a large lot is maybe not what somebody else considers a large lot. So I would just say, just take that part out and just use the square footages or the lot sizes like you were doing the width and the depth. Okay, on the one-way 45-foot cross-section, nicely done, good call. One of the comments I saw from staff is that you were thinking maybe to take that out of the community plan and only address it once you get to the village plans. And my concern is the way that we've always treated the DAP to the CP to the VP is it's kind of like a menu. You've got this huge big menu, and then you take it down a level, and you take it down a level. So I think if we take it out of the community plan, they then don't have that option in the village plan. So I'd like to leave it in the community plan.
With the changes brought up by Councilman Porter?
With the changes brought up by Councilman Porter, yes. And also, and if I'm not mistaken, those actually fit our normal private cross-sections, so.
And, you know, I understood that Mr. Minor he might have had some additional comments, so if there's anything we need to address further before the final recording of the community plan, we can certainly do that.
Right.
I can offer clarification about my comment if you'd like.
Please.
It's carefully worded. It says it shall not be allowed for roads that are needed for fire protection. So in the community plan, I couldn't see context. I couldn't see how that particular road was going to be used. We've got the luxury of having the fire marshal, fire chief here tonight to talk about the fire code. I mean, he's the first line on the fire code, but according to my understanding of the fire code, that right-of-way that's shown there would not, could not be used to access, to be used as a fire protection access road.
Do you have comments, Chief? Or clarifications for us?
Happy to comment on it. I think I need a little bit more clarification as to which road we're talking about.
It's that 45 width cross-section where it's got the parking on one side. It's a single direction, one-way road.
And as he's reviewing that, I'll just, clarify, this came up during Planning Commission, and our goal was to revise our section to be consistent with what was approved in Legacy Farms at their entry, where you have one-way traffic in and out with the big boulevard in the middle. That's the intent. We may or may not have a need or opportunity to do some kind of more grandiose divided entry into a portion of the community, and so it's a 14, I believe it's a 14 and a half or 14-foot drive lane, and then correct parking.
14-foot drive lane is with 8 feet of parking. Due to the fact that it is one way, we're having some discussions on other developments as well that are proposing similar type access points or cross sections, and so it doesn't meet the 20-foot wide drive aisle. However, due to the fact that it is one way,
with specific parking on one side, does that make a difference as well?
Yeah, and right, and it would have to be signed on the other side that there is absolutely no parking on the other sides.
So it's something you could possibly work with if...
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's the one side.
I was thinking this was just a one-way road, there'd be like a loop of houses off of it. I didn't realize you
Oh,
were
like the
adding
slip
more.
lane area.
And so that was my issue. I couldn't see context. I
Right.
couldn't see how the road was being applied.
And is that something that you're comfortable with looking at further as it comes into the village plan for both of you? Or is that something that needs to be addressed here in the community plan before we get there?
No, I think in knowing that it was proposed to be kind of an entry type use, the fact that it's one way alleviates a lot of concern.
Okay. Gordon, does that help also?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Clarification, please, on page 19 on your cluster home driveways. So it's just that very next page down from that. So if you've got the 16-foot driveway, oops, that's not right. I think it was mostly on the cluster, especially on the six-pack where you're counting your driveway as parking area.
The better graphic to use to answer your question would be on page 48, and that's the 2D black and white version of this. It kind of occurs in two places, both in the product and in the transportation. So I'm sorry, go ahead and...
Yeah. So I guess my question is my concern is that you've got this driveway coming back, and you're saying that it's a 16-foot deep driveway, but in reality, you've got the whole corners cut off as the other cars are trying to navigate in and out, be it out of the guest parking or as they're coming out of their driveways and backing up. So I don't know that that's really able to be counted as true parking. I think you might come into some conflict areas. So that makes me nervous about counting that as parking area. And I do realize it's kind of in addition to what you have there, and you have increased that a little bit. It just is, it seems a little tight to me. I've been out to your product and kind of looked at that and seen that, and it's pretty tight. And maybe people will only have quote-unquote smart cars out there, but maybe they don't have an Armada. It's just something that I'm concerned about counting that as actual parking. And were you doing that on the 4-pack on the back side as well, counting that?
So both, based on our initial concept plan meeting with you all and subsequent staff comments and planning commission comments, we had provided the off-street guest parking.
Right.
It's not how the product that you toured looks, but I believe that we were successful at showing that in separating the guest parking out from the normal drive paths, and that, as long as, it's not a super dually, that it should accommodate, 95% of guest parking expectations in there, and there's still going to be adequate movement for getting vehicles in and out, because there is no other parking allowed in the driveway other than in those guest spaces. You can't park in front of the garages. That is all. Once someone is in the garage, that's where the car stays. When it's time to back out, they can use all those other areas to turn and navigate their vehicles.
That was like one of my other comments you brought up, the guest parking there and not. There was a comment in there that you couldn't park overnight in the guest parking. And I actually want to hopefully have you make a little bit of a tweak to that. I would actually recommend that through the HOA, through some kind of a permitting process or something like that, the guests actually could park overnight for a period of time, not to exceed a week, or however you want to do it as an HOA. My fear is that they're going to have guests stay overnight, and you're going to force them to park out on the street, which is actually less safe for both their vehicles and then also for, just to have the vehicles out on the street. It would be, I think, a lot better to allow that permitted, right? So you don't end up with the residents parking there all the time and using it as their parking. But so you have that ability to have overnight guests.
24-hour maximum.
However you want to do that. Yeah, if it's a 24-hour maximum or a 3-day maximum or whatever, and even to the point of, giving them a permit or however you want to take care of it. But something so that you're not forcing the guests out onto the street. Okay. Open space, so I appreciate you not counting the churches within your required open space and the school parks within your, I think that's great, that's really nice. I love your connectors and all of the view corridors. I think you've done a great job with that. We really appreciate you trying to give us those open spaces with all the trees in the park area. I think that will really add to your community. I think I talked a little bit about Neighborhood Park, and just with making sure you add that wording, Dave, into the neighborhood park, that if it's not contiguous to one of our previous, okay, perfect. And then also a question on the non-motorized, be it on the one that you're doing or the one that you might help us do, whatever. It says light watercraft, it doesn't say non-motorized, and I just wonder if we need to actually specify non-motorized, because I think jet skis actually qualify as light watercraft, but they would still entail trailers and ramps and things like that. So I don't know if we need to make that adjustment, but that might be something we just want to look at.
You know, just out of curiosity, in the facility that the city is planning, is the city planning on placing restrictions on the type of watercraft that can and can't be launched there?
Yeah, it would be a non-motorized launch at that point.
Well, I think we should change our language then as well to non-motorized.
But that's the intent. That's the intent, and you have the marina around
exactly.
the corner, right?
And the non-motorized has completely different ramp standards than a motorized.
It's a much easier way to say it. I'm like, do I want to list canoe, kayak, stand-up paddleboard, and
yeah. So usually you just say non-motorized, so I think that's fine.
What about smaller craft that use like a Dakota motor, like a single-person inflatable pontoon, a raft with a battery?
So I think the biggest thing is just whether or not you have the ability to trailer launch. If they don't need a trailer launch, I think you're fine, but most of those, I don't know if they need a trailer launch or not.
If they don't.
If they don't need a trailer launch, you can carry them on your back, then I don't think there would be a problem.
Motorized, it's got a motor.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure there's a distinction in the traffic code that we can find that will do that, because you're right, when you have a boat, like we used to have it's called the Skanu, that's got a flat back, and there was a little small motor on the back, and we did not have to register that. So I think it's probably tied to something in the traffic code when it comes to registration of vehicles.
Okay.
So we can look into that.
Yeah, if you would look into that and see how we can word that, so because I think we have the same intent, it's just a matter of making sure we're wording it correctly. It'd be great, thanks, Mayor. Okay, and then just a couple of random mistakes, because that's kind of what I do. Page 16, it's not Pioneer Crossing Parkway, it's just Pioneer Crossing. And then page 52, make sure it says historic instead of history. So it's just
52?
52, yeah. Just
5-2, I'm sorry.
5-2, yeah. There you go, some random typos for you. Because that's kind of how I roll sometimes. It just says, similar to the history prairie style instead of historic prairie style. So, just, I see those things and it is what it is.
It's a gift.
Or a curse, take your pick.
Easter eggs for you, Shelley.
Yes. Yes.
You geek out on sewers, she geeks out on this stuff.
Yeah, editing and stuff, yeah. So I found it interesting on your, what's the actual page number? Your page 65 on the sanitary sewer master plan, and I didn't see this on any of the other maps, or at least I wasn't paying attention. You have a line on there that's notated no basement line. So none of your homes up against the river will have basements? They'll all be?
Before any additional earthwork is performed, that would be the case today. But if we come in and import soil and lift things up, then we can change that.
So kind of like some of our other developments have done. So I was just kind of surprised to see that.
Well, it's a line that sometimes relates to the sewer and just, the depth of the sewer and its proximity to groundwater, so.
Got it.
Certainly wherever we can offer basements, we want.
I was going to say, especially here in Utah, that's kind of like expected.
Yeah, and we do both. We have both basement, slide along grade, crawl space in neighborhoods. We would love the whole thing to be basements, but there is a water table issue that we have to address and make sure we address appropriately.
Yeah.
And so when we get into there and we get into how we're going to go ahead and address it from the standpoint of how much import, how much we can raise the houses, all of that stuff. But we would love to have all basements.
Yeah. It's fairly standard around here, as you well know, so. Okay, that's it, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Woolman.
Oh, also, note on the, no, just, it's the same thing. Just a note, make sure that in the conditions and stuff that we put, that a light and noise notice is placed on all plats and titles for both the sports complex and the RC park. We don't want our RC park to have to shut down like a couple of others have done because of complaining neighbors, please. Thanks.
That's how I roll. No, I appreciate how much time and effort you guys, your team has put into this. I mean, we've done 2-on-2s, and then you met with the planning commission and us jointly, gone through a lot, and you've really taken into consideration almost every feedback that you can within reason, and I think that you've been a great partner with the city, similar to what Councilmember McComber stated. I think what we're doing, preserving the riverfront and stuff like that, will benefit residents for generations, and so we really appreciate you being willing to work and do that, and I think it'll be a fantastic product. You know, and I'm actually excited about the new variety of products that you're bringing, because one of the complaints we talk about on council is we always get the same type of homes or whatnot, and so the products you're bringing will actually provide a new product out there. It's a new variety, a different type of thing, and it'll give some mixture of, we're not exactly the same cookie cutter type of house throughout the city, so I appreciate what you're doing there. Like where you put the potential commercial, you took our feedback on that, and really appreciate you working through that. I think that's about all I had. You know, I agree with the comment about the not making, if we maintain the parks, it just needs to be continuous or contiguous. Or continuous if you want it to be. That's all I had, Mayor.
One more question for staff, Mark. With where it connects to 400 South, they've got the walkway, the Hot Springs Greenway Park, and our baseball fields. We were going to have staff talk with Rocky Mountain Power about kind of cleaning up that substation so it's not razor wire and chain link. It actually blends into the two developments with the walkway. Have we reached out to Rocky Mountain Power, or?
We haven't yet, but we certainly can, and we've got lots of time to work with them on this particular issue. I mean, we've still got village plans and lots of things, but, I mean, it's certainly something that we'll talk with them about. Unless
it's really within your park, but it's, you know, if staff can help both of you guys work with Rocky Mountain Power.
Unless it's an obstacle course.
That's true.
Got some electricity. Oh, there's electricity too.
Spartan race or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, we went out today at your suggestion to see some of the new tot lot equipment that went in, and so every time we drive by that, we try to be creative in thinking through solutions to how we're going to address those outside edges. So we do look forward to working with the city on that one. Yeah, that was pretty neat.
Okay. Okay.
I just want to go on the record because I know that the cottage lots have been a concern. As I've been looking at this, from a HOA, you would have the right and a property right to create what you're looking at with this easement and having the nicer backyards, that more usable space. And so whether that's an option, that's fine. I like the transparency of having it up front. I think that it also, from a legal perspective, actually protects the homeowners a little bit more, because it's saying from the very beginning you knew that this was an easement scenario. I definitely understand where Councilwoman Barch is coming. This is something that I've dealt with too, thinking about quite a bit. And then I also had the thought with the whole wall thing and people bouncing off the wall. A townhome has a shared wall, and so that's even more, you know, kids bouncing a basketball off the wall in their bedroom or whatever. And so I think that obviously moving into this neighborhood, moving into this quad kind of feel, or even a sixplex with the cottages, you know what you're getting. It's not like you're going in there with blinders on. You know that your backyard is as an easement. I'm sure it's actually a selling point. You're actually telling people, like, look at this, you're actually going to get usable space, and we have this easement, so your property's here, your neighbor's property there, but they're going to share this over here. I mean, as a salesperson, I would absolutely just tout that as a positive. And so I don't think it's going to be anything, and I just like the transparency of having it just up front. And so I just wanted to make this because Councilman Barch and I have had this conversation a lot, and I just think that really it comes down to, I prefer the transparency versus burying it in a contract or in an HOA agreement. And then I also appreciate your willingness to accommodate a planning commissioner on, that really isn't a decision maker, but a recommending body, to have the HOA as an option to maintain that space if they want to pay for that. Also, the HOA, which I really like, can go in and maintain it and then charge back to the resident if they don't maintain it to the standards of not only the HOA, but to the city. To me, it's actually going to make for better neighbors, because if they allow the weeds to grow and it gets really bad, right now when my neighbors' weeds get really tall, I have to go to the HOA, and then the HOA tries to send them letters and stuff, where you're actually going to put it in where, yeah, you'll probably try and do fines and things first, but eventually you can actually go on that property and clean it up. Where in my HOA, your HOA can't go on your property.
We just don't have the guts to do it.
Your HOA can go on your private property and clean up?
Technically, they can.
Not according to current state law, they cannot.
Oh, state law changed it?
Yeah.
We cannot.
So
unless we change our CCNRs. So now's the time to do it.
Now's the time to do it. So again, I guess what we're saying is thinking ahead and getting it, so it's actually going to make for better neighbors. And I actually look at this, the type of people who are going to move in here are actually going to probably want to move in and are very neighborly anyway. You're not going to want to live here. If you're not one who likes to have a lot of neighbors close by, you're not going to move in here. So I actually think, to Councilman Wilden's point, it's a new product type, it's a new option for the city. Driving up in Lehigh, where you have the two, it couldn't be a more perfect case study for you. Townhomes that look like ugly brownstones, super close together with the narrowest space between that's not even usable, especially with the window wells. You're walking like this. And then what you have a little bit further east, where you have these great clusters and the houses look larger, and it just looks so much nicer. So I'm very excited to have a diversity here, but I do want to recognize that was a concern, but that's why I'm going to be voting the way I am, because I like the diversity, and I also like that you did accommodate concerns from even planning commissioners and even have tried to address concerns from the council. So thank you.
Sure, if I could say a comment at that, we're going to be together a long time, and hopefully we've demonstrated how important transparency is to us, and our commitment to you is that that's what you'll get out of us for the next 10 years as we're working together in this neighborhood. Obviously, we would love full and complete support from everybody, but we recognize sometimes that's not possible, but you do have our commitment to always work that way with you.
I think what you're building, you'll find you won't be working with us as long as you think. In a good way. That's, I'm not sure. I think you're going to build a lot faster because you're building a great product and people want to live here. And you'll be financially successful. I wasn't predicting it.
To teach you a little bit.
Yeah. I deserve that.
5-7 years now. Honestly, look at some of the neighboring developments around here. Thank you.
So, Mayor, I had a question, actually. So, just out of curiosity, Councilman McComber, if you like the way this is working out, so what's the difference between this and doing a true zero lot line? Why do you see that this is different?
I don't see this as a true zero lot line. Okay. I see this as an easement, and they could do it as an HOA agreement, but I think that that's being tricky, and I would rather have it transparent. So from the very beginning, and all the documentation, it's showing that we know there's going to be a land easement here. And the thing is we have easements all over. We have easements in on my side yard, your backyard, public use easements. I really do see that because it's documented, they actually have more. These people are going to have more protections legally. The lawsuit argument, I think, is a little bit shallow because you actually have more liability, someone on your sidewalk and in your driveway, if they go up in your driveway, because you have no contract saying that this is a legal easement and that you are agreeing to allow people to be on your property and have access to your property and make changes to it. I'm sure the documentation talks about sprinkler systems and things like that. So they actually are going to be, I think, even more protected than what I am when my neighbor flooded my basement.
I'm just curious as to functionally why it would be different than a zero lot line. Like, why not just if you're going to do that, then why not just make them own it up to the house? What's the difference as far as functionality goes?
Well, I think it's because then you can have the next side over, you have the ability to have the space for another combined use, and you can still say that there is accessibility from both sides because the landowner still can access. But if you're zero lot line, then you actually are saying that they really don't have access to the side of their house where they do have, let's say their stucco's cracking and they want to go in and work on it. Well, they have the right to go and work on their stucco on that property because it's technically theirs and the neighbor has an easement. So they'd be able to go backyard, if they want to clean their windows, they could put a ladder up against their house, have the ladder go into their neighbor's easement backyard, but it's still their property. So I think that allows for just more accessibility from both, because zero, then it'd be like, I have to get permission to get out there to wash the windows because it's not my property at all. But
I was just curious.
yeah, no, and I totally get where you're coming from, because you and I have had the zero lot line concern a ton. I absolutely think that this is a creative solution that adds for a diversity, but thanks.
Well, one thing too, Councilmember Barch, is that you could have different building codes come into play at that point. If you have a true zero lot line, there are openings, things like that, building code, how it's constructed. If you have that 5 foot, you could have some openings, which may not be applicable if you have the true zero lot line. I know some of those units, they do have windows up higher where you can't physically look in them, but it does bring light into the house. That could come into play too, if it was a true zero. I believe there's an exception based on square footage of the wall, and a certain square footage could have window, but yeah, could be.
You still don't want to clean those. I think that's why I made it.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
Before you do that too, can I go over what it looks like, items you brought up that you want to include? My computer just had to shut down, so let me just bring that back up. Okay, assuming that, we'll go to the screen here, assuming the motion will have the conditions of approval, we would add, or have some language added that if a neighborhood park moves away from the city-maintained areas, then the HOAs will maintain the neighborhood park. Not contiguous. Keep the road cross-sections in the community plan. Allow HOA to permit guest parking with a certain time limit, as you have to come up with, 24 hours, whatever it may be. We can add that into the plan. And then the light noise notice on all plats for the adjacent, the park, the RC park. Did I miss anything that was brought up by anybody else?
I think, is there any way, I don't know if it's a condition of approval, but that we work together to get the river park earlier on?
Like if they need our help.
If they need our help, like, I don't know, I don't want that to be I don't want us to be the sticking point or to prevent that from happening, because if I can get that park sooner, I'm all for it.
I think we could just direct staff to.
Okay, great, then I don't need to add it, but I want to make sure that we're working with you and the landowner, current landowner, to get that riverfront park as quickly as possible. And then you'd have those credits, you know, work from it, and then also be protected. And really quick, I make sure the developer,
Has work done before.
so for me, because like if I understand correctly, you're pulling down land at phases, right?
Yes.
You're not doing it all at once.
That's correct.
So the thing is if the economy, where Mark likes to say, is going to have a balloon burst, and houses will, you know, and you end up not pulling phase 3, they end up not buying that from the church. They only end up doing 1 and 2, but then we put in this park. I think there needs to be some kind of protection, because if we're asking them to do something before they're actually buying the land even, that we would then be able to, some kind of agreement that can be worked with the landowner and the city, so that when someone does come and develop that, then they would then have to.
Well, I think that probably could be an
Pioneering
agreement
agreement,
between,
or-
that probably could even be between them and the landowner, because.
But we're maintaining, yeah, so we'll probably be involved to a degree.
Yeah, to agree.
But I just want to make sure that we are playing a part in that, because if we're maintaining it and all of these things, there just needs to be some protections, because I want you to be encouraged to participate and do this without putting undue risk, because if I was in business and if I was a stockholder, I'd be concerned, right? I'd be like, well, why are you doing that? You should wait. There's no reason you have to. Even on your phase 2, when we were talking about the, the park and all that, and you're worried that maybe you don't have enough in your village 2 to have, technically you do, because the school and churches count. And they're being generous, but technically, legally, the contract says that counts, and so you would meet it. And so I just want to make sure that we're being good partners. They're playing nice in the playground, right? I want to play nice too. So I just want to make sure that, we won't put it as a condition, but I'm just making sure staff knows my concerns, that we are working with them to, let's make that happen.
Okay, I had one other possible condition, that the school park is permitted but not required in all of the villages.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you want to allow more parks, I'm fine with that.
Well, it's more schools, but.
And more schools and parks next to schools and.
Yeah.
So, it was, yeah. Oh, I thought you said something.
So, Mayor, just a quick, I know that they're very anxious to get going on Village Plan 1, and we'll work with them on this park conversation. I think that's going to be an evolving thing. They've been great partners to work with. Just from a prioritization standpoint, I think Village Plan 1 will be coming in, and we'll still be working through these issues. But as soon as we've got some information and movement, we'll pass that along.
Well, they meet the park requirements,
You
open
bet.
space for Village Plan 1. I'm just saying simultaneously, let's just
You
keep
bet.
having conversations so we move forward. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Dave, did you have both on the plat and the titles for the sports complex and the RC park? And for the sports, specifically sports complex and RC park, right? Okay.
It makes for good neighbors.
All right.
Okay.
I think I'm ready. I move that we approve Jordan Promenade Community Plan as listed on item 3 with all staff findings and conditions. Oh, as listed on 3, that's the ordinance. Anyway, with the ordinance 18-25 dated today. All staff findings and conditions, adding, have you added?
He can actually read them off for you if you want.
I haven't typed them out, but I got my list or so.
All right, I'll list them off. Adding a condition that the neighborhood park will be maintained by the HOA if it moves to be non-contiguous with city, with the greenway spaces or city property. That all plat and titles will have notes informing the residents of future or potential light and noise. That the developer will work with the HOA to allow guest parking, overnight guest parking in the cluster homes. We will keep, do I need to say we keep the right cross sections because they're already in there?
Yeah, because the commission also take it out.
Oh, we're removing the condition to take it out, I guess. And then the school park use will be permitted but not required in all of the villages.
I will second that.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman Porter, second from Councilman McComber. Any further discussion on the motion?
Just a comment that I would like in the notes, that my vote will be based on, strictly on the cottage shared use areas, that I think that it's potential liability, that I think it's making a situation bad for neighbors, and then that I think it is inequitable to other developers whom we have not allowed to do similar products.
So I guess I need to add, the reason why I'm voting for it is pretty much the opposite, except I do understand that it wasn't for other developers, but we always change things. And so developers going forward will be able to do it. So, thanks.
Okay, I have first, a second, two statements. Is this part of the motion, or is this a
Well, I think it
statement?
will affect it. I didn't hear that my one condition be taken out about that entry road.
We did. We took it out. The one-way roadway, we took it out.
My condition?
He said we removed 6. Well, you didn't say, but he said he removed the, yeah. He said he removed the one-way road.
So the thing is, that condition says take them out. My condition would still apply if it was in. So, that makes sense? So, my condition ought to be modified to, satisfy the fire chief.
Modifying my motion to
satisfy the fire chief.
Put 6 back in, but put a condition that the fire chief approve it. Subject to the approval of the fire chief.
Okay.
For the third time.
I have an amended first, second. Do I have amended statements? Okay. I will do a roll call. Porter.
Aye.
Barch.
Nay.
McComber.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Podeska.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you will, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I need my vote, amended A, B, subsection.
Yes. Okay. I will entertain a motion on the minutes.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Seconded.
Okay, I have a first and a second. All in favor?
I had one, sorry, I had one change and I sent it to Kayla. You made the change. Thanks.
I approve with submitted changes by Councilwoman Barger.
And seconded.
Okay. Anybody want to make a statement? Okay, all in favor?
Aye. I move that we go to closed session.
Okay.
I second.
First and second, all in favor?
Aye.